Hello, Northern Lifers. Mark Gentili here, the editor of Northern Life. To my left, we have political affairs reporter Darren McDonald, and across from me, we have the candidate in Nickel Belt for the Conservative Party, Aino Laamanen. Good morning, Aino. How are you today?
Good morning. I'm fine.
Thank you so very much for joining us here today. I know you were real busy during the campaign period. We didn't really think this interview with you, the chance to sit down and have a nice, polite conversation, was going to happen, but you were good enough to get back to us and give us a call, and we were able to set this up for 10 days out to the federal election. So thank you very much for joining us this morning.
You're most welcome.
Excellent. So now, you kind of came into the race. I think there are quite a number of people who know who you are, but we don't know too much about you. So maybe can you tell us a little bit about yourself just before we kind of get into the nitty-gritty of the platforms and all that kind of stuff?
As to why I'm in the race?
Why you're in the race, who you are, where
am.
you're from. Are you a lifelong Sudburian? Do you ride a unicycle?
I ride a Harley, actually.
You ride a Harley?
Yes.
Let's start with the Harley then.
Well, actually, I was born in Finland.
Okay.
Our family immigrated to Canada when I was 10. I was one of 10 children.
Okay.
It was quite a challenge. We
Yeah,
didn't
I
speak
imagine.
any English, and the culture shock was something to get over.
Yeah, my dad is an immigrant too, so we'd often hear stories of the challenge that it coming to a
Yes.
new country and what it's like not knowing the language.
So my dad worked on a dairy farm in southern Ontario. In 1967, I moved up to Sudbury. I had a boyfriend here and a job.
Yeah.
I worked in accounting in a chartered accountant's office
Okay.
and got married a year later, and we had 4 children rather quickly and started a business in 1973, a construction business.
Okay. What's the name of it?
Laamanen Construction.
Okay. Is it still around?
No, it's no longer around. It was in the 70s, kind of tough to get started, but we did all right and really enjoyed our wonderful employees, and mostly worked in the industrial and commercial area.
Okay.
What kind of construction? Will we know any of the buildings, or?
We did a lot of work for Inco, EB Eddy, some commercial. Yes, there is one in the Walden Industrial Park. I can't tell you exactly. It's one of the bigger buildings on the left-hand side going out. So concrete was actually we worked on the super stack.
Really?
Oh, wow.
Yes, yeah,
Well, that's kind of historical.
it is.
In what capacity?
I think we were pouring concrete because concrete was our big item.
That's interesting.
Wow. So now, I mean, a lot of people who come to a new country, they have a bit of a different perspective maybe on what life or the culture is like when they come here, politics, that sort of thing. Do you have that sort of mindset still? You were 10 years old when you came here. Do you still have does that give you think a different perspective on life in Canada?
Well, the perspective I get now, I go back quite often. I have
Okay.
family and friends there, and I get to see the world through the eyes of the Finnish people.
Mm-hmm.
Their culture is much like ours. In fact, they call Finland the Canada of Europe. Surprisingly,
really?
Yes, and it's
very small Canada.
Yes, but their lifestyle's much like ours. The sauna and the lakes and the rocks, and they're very honest people. They're hardworking. They're very proud of that.
Mm-hmm.
So Canada's much like that, and except that we're a melting pot, and
Right.
they are, up until recently, they were mostly just the one race.
Yeah.
They have issues. They have the Sami people in the north, just
Okay.
like our natives, and they have the Roma people.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember seeing them as children too. So they have issues like that too, and I get to see what they think of the Americas
Okay.
from their news, and it's quite interesting.
What do they think?
The States, it's not very popular for the Finns. Although some of them think it's the promised land. It's like that's where my father was heading for when we came, but he couldn't get into the U.S. I'm very happy that he couldn't, that I'm a Canadian. My parents love Canada, and they emphasize that we should learn English and speak English. So as a result, most of my siblings did not keep the language.
Really?
The older 2 or 3 did. But I had to really work at keeping my language.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And how's your Finnish today?
I'm fluent, actually.
Yeah.
I went to U of T, did some master's studies courses, and I chose Finnish as my second language. They had a department there, and I passed my exam reasonably well. And I worked my way through this huge history book in Finnish just last year.
Okay.
I had to use the iPad and a couple of dictionaries to get through it, but yeah, it was it's a good exercise.
Is your husband Finnish as well?
He was also born in Finland and came
Okay.
as a 2-year-old, so he's no longer with us.
I'm
So
sorry
the
to hear that.
company isn't either in. But I have 6 wonderful grandchildren.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
You said you had 4 kids?
4 children and 6 grandchildren now. Yeah.
Oh, that's really...
Now, as an immigrant yourself, does that give you a different perspective on some of the debates that are going on this election? You know, with the niqab and you know,
Well, I understand that there's, for the first generation that immigrates, they really want to bring their beliefs, their culture with them. And the second generation has a really hard time with that. And there's often conflict between, that
Between
generation and the next
generations, yeah.
generation. So I understand that. My parents went through the same thing. We attended a Finnish-speaking church, and, we were not so much the culture, much, especially the church area was very important. So yes, I understand that dichotomy. Yeah,
I think it's interesting because if you look at headlines from newspapers in Sudbury in the 50s and 60s, it wasn't uncommon to see something like Finnish man arrested for whatever. It almost seemed to be like people were maybe a little uncomfortable with immigration even then.
Oh,
Toward the Finnish community.
Yes, well, I was in Northern Ontario, but where we lived in Blackstock, Southern Ontario, there were no other immigrants, and the British were really not that happy to have immigrants in their community. Some of them. So yes, we experienced a bit of that, but I know I have worked hard to compensate to be the best in my class and things like that. So
Really?
yeah.
But I wonder, does that give you a perspective on what, for example, some of the Muslim immigrants are going through now? There's some hostility and
Yes,
people
I
are
would
concerned
understand.
about what it means for Canadian society. Does that give you a different perspective?
Yes, I think I have a bit more of an understanding from that point of view. Yeah.
And how does that sort of influence the way you view those issues?
What can I say? I sympathize with that struggle, and as far as their dress, that's up to the individual, and our Canadian courts are very fair. We're going to find a reasonable solution that suits everybody, I think, on that issue.
Are you comfortable with the approach that the Tory government is taking, or what the Tory party is taking?
I might be just more center of the Tories at the moment, but I think they're trying to find their way through this. This is a new issue for Canada, so yeah.
Is it a new issue, though? Because you yourself were saying, you experienced this similar sort of resistance when you came over. And I know my dad did, too, when he came over in the early 50s.
Oh, where did he come from?
Italy.
Oh, yes.
And, he had dark skin and all that sort of stuff, but he
Yeah.
was not popular.
Oh, yes, there would have been some racism, I think.
Oh,
Just
for
a
sure.
little bit of racism, yes.
Yeah, for sure.
But I don't think my dad was so hardworking. I don't think he even thought about that. He was just going to do my best, and I'm going to get ahead. And they did amazingly well. No schooling. They had to teach themselves how to read construction drawings because they hadn't the schooling. But they ended up with mortgages paid and camps in the bush, and amazingly well because they worked so hard.
Right. The Tories, there's sort of two. Some people are quite critical of the approach that your party has taken when it comes to the niqab, use of terms like barbaric cultural practices to describe, certain aspects of other cultures that come to Canada. How does that make you uncomfortable as someone who has experienced similar, maybe not to the same degree, but experienced some resistance to, you're just being judged just based on your culture without being wrong?
The Finnish politics is amazing. Lots of women there and in high positions. So the Finnish women have fought hard to get their equality, and they're way ahead of Canada in that. I'd like to know the background of the practices, whether it is a suppression of women or not. I'm not sure because I'm not of that culture.
Right.
But that would be my concern. I'd want the women to have total freedom so that their culture wasn't imposing that on them. If it's their own choice, that's fine.
Right.
You entered the race not late, but you're the last person.
Oh, rather late.
Yeah, rather late.
Yes.
But what I do wonder is, what is your history with the Conservative Party? Have you always been a Conservative?
Well,
how far back does it go? Were you a Brian Mulroney Conservative? Were you a Reformed Conservative? What's your history with the party?
Preston Manning would press me
born?
a lot, so I go way back. I got interested in politics, I guess just listening to the news. I've listened to CBC for as long as, well, since I came to Sudbury. And I got a pretty good education there. And in my courses, I took a philosophy course on democracy, and I was fascinated with that. And I have very traditional values, so, you know, truth-telling and taking care of everybody and being very fiscally responsible, not overspending. Those are ingrained in me, so I naturally gravitate toward those values. So I've been involved in many campaigns, just as a volunteer, never as a candidate before. So
Right.
I was invited because there wasn't anyone running in August. So beginning of September, I got this surprise call and was quite shocked and honored.
What was your when someone called and asked, you know, if you were interested? What was your reaction? Like, what was your first
I
thought?
thought, well, I got to sit down and think about this. Actually, when he called, I thought he was calling for money, as they do, you know, for donations. And when he told me this, well, I said, wow, I really need to think about this. And for a few days, I did think about it, and I called back. And I thought, well, why not? I love to learn new skills, and I haven't got, other than the permaculture and organic farming I've been studying the last couple of years.
Right.
I didn't have a project. I needed something to sink my teeth into. So the timing was good for me.
What's the experience been like so far? You know, getting up with the baits, you know, canvassing. You know, I mean, it must be quite an education.
Overwhelming. I was registered on the 11th of September, and by that time, everybody else had been in the race for
A month or so.
a couple of months, I guess, almost. And yeah, overwhelming, the workload, and not enough volunteers, and yeah, just I could use another 10, 15 people. But, you know, the people that come out of the woodwork are just wonderful, wonderful people, and willing to help. And so each day I get one more helper. So it's good.
Was it that excitement? Was it, you said, you know, you always want to learn new things. Is that what sort of attracted you to running? It was a new experience? Or was there some sort of...
more than that,
Okay.
because I've always followed politics, and that's, if I can be of any service to my community, to the Nickel Belt, to my country, that would be the foremost reason.
Right. You said you volunteered on other campaigns, and you're talking about service to your community. Are you a volunteer with any other?
Oh, yes, I've volunteered for years. So I was a big sister, and then I was on the board. I was in the Finnish Rest Home Society board,
Right.
Sudbury Theatre Centre.
Oh, wow.
I like the arts. I've acted a little bit. I sat for 7 years in this Sudbury Soil Study Public Advisory Committee. That was very interesting because I'm very concerned about the environment, so that was a good fit. I volunteer at the mission on some Friday nights.
Okay.
With a great gang.
What acting have you done?
A friend of mine, David Stapleton, wrote a play, 5 Kings and a Mother, and I was.
Were you a king or a mother?
I was a mother. It was a fabulous experience because I hadn't done acting before, and yeah, just kind of gets you out of yourself.
What was your character? You were the mother.
I was a Jewish woman scrubbing a floor.
Okay.
I loved it.
Being in the spotlight like that, can you take anything from that experience and use it in this you know, political forum?
You know what? I think it helps with confidence.
Right.
I was very shy when I was young.
Okay.
I barely speak, so anything like that helps.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Something during the Nickel Belt debate that I found interesting was something that you had said. Over the course of the evening was that I can't remember your exact quote, but it was something to the effect that I'm the greenest conservative that you're ever going to meet, or something along those lines. I think is what you said. I was kind of curious about what you meant by that.
Green meaning that I'm very environmentally conscious. I've been worried about what chemicals and sprays and poisons are in our fruit and vegetables. So when I go to the grocery store, I have a really hard time buying anything.
Right.
So I look to see where it came from, and if I can find out, if I can buy green or organic, I will. So this last 2 summers, I've started doing kind of an organic growing where I've got a mound of rotting material, and I put soil on top of that, and I grow vegetables and berries, and I've got all sorts of things growing, grapes, and yeah, red and black currants. And
Okay. You
Yeah.
you mentioned just a few minutes ago, you mentioned your interest in permaculture. My sister is very into permaculture, but I don't know how many people, really understand what it is necessarily. Do you think you could
Well,
explain it to us?
I got a friend of mine who's also into farming invited me to go to a seminar in Gimli, Manitoba. Sepp Holzer, that's Holzer, from Austria, has been doing that type of farming in the mountains of Austria since he was a little boy.
My sister might have been at that same.
Oh my goodness!
that you were at, actually. That would be weird
Yes.
if that was the case.
It was fabulous. So the idea of permaculture is so you grow crops and you use and graze animals in a fashion that you don't lose or degrade your soils. And we are, with our huge monoculture farms, we are destroying the soil. And we put too many chemicals in the soil, and they all wash into our lakes and rivers. And so he's got a totally different way of approaching agriculture. Also, you want to keep the water on the land. You don't just let it, drain off. So this, he's actually, and then I went to Austria last year to tour his 2 sites.
Okay.
And learn some more. He actually digs ponds and streams and lakes, and then lets the rainwater fill them. And so that there's always water for the crops that you grow then.
Right.
And to be growing crops like the stable, you'd have a strip of one plant and then something else. So, and you'd have some space with natural plants growing in between, so you wouldn't have the wash out.
My sister kind of described it to me as almost like, almost like a decorative Japanese garden, in the sense that it's very planned out and very deliberate, except that you can eat everything that's there.
Yes. Well, that's one style, terraces. Well, because Sepp Holzer lived in the mountains, he did a lot of terracing. So so that prevents the washing away of the soil when you do terrace. But his hugel beds, he calls them, just raised beds like mine, it isn't very, very pretty. It's just like everything growing together. But I don't mind. I like that.
Given your interest in the environment and in green technology, green living, that sort of thing, how concerned are you about climate change?
I am concerned. I'm very concerned. I think we really need to get serious about it and get everybody from the ground up. Teach the children in school. And I think we should be doing way more in recycling, using almost everything we throw out. We can probably reuse in another fashion.
Right.
We need to promote that and make it possible for. I think high school should have contests. What's the brightest idea for reuse of something we threw out?
Right.
Yeah.
The Conservative Party, they have taken quite a bit of criticism for their approach to addressing climate change, for withdrawing from the Kyoto Accord, things like that. Are you comfortable with the direction that Stephen Harper has taken the party in terms of their approach to the environment, climate change?
I think that people like myself could maybe push him a little bit in the green direction from within. I'm hoping that's the case.
Okay.
Now, you mentioned that you came to the Conservatives through the Reform Party and Preston Manning. I wonder if you could give me maybe a sense of some of the Tory policies that you're most in favor of, or ones that are most important to you that you're campaigning on?
Well, for sure, fiscal responsibility. I think it's not wise to spend beyond our means. What really worries me is what kind of a debt burden are we passing on to our grandchildren? And that's irresponsible. We need to live within our means. So when the government collects tax monies, they need to, of course, look after the whole country, not just one or two loud segments that are asking for more money. And of course, everybody's always asking for more money. That's a tough job to allocate the right percentages, the right amounts. And of course, healthcare is really important. And I think prevention in that, we should do more of that, because if you can stay healthy, you're not going to be needing, we won't be spending near as much on that. But also, government waste is close to my heart. So that, we need to be prudent and wise in our use. Healthcare, I have a really soft spot in my heart for those that don't have a voice. So, children, their safety, human trafficking is an issue that I'm I would like to work on.
How do the conservative policies, as they stand now, play into some of your concerns or some of your priorities? For example, helping those most at risk, or seniors and healthcare. Exactly what do the Tories have planned? That
Well, healthcare is tough because it is administered by the provinces. But I think that we as the federal government should play a role in trying to maybe encourage wiser use of dollars wherever we can. Let's say have more. I have a 94-year-old mother who's still in her own home, and I know it's a lot. Yeah, she's amazing. It saves money to have seniors in their own homes, but they need all sorts of supports. And if you can get family members, I have one brother. I have my 7 little brothers. One of them lives with my mother, and I help him, oversee that. And it's working, and I think that's one avenue where we can maybe direct and help and encourage. I don't know all the ins and outs of how much the federal government can influence the provinces in their areas. Of course, roads, we're always complaining about our roads, but again, that's provincial. So if there's anything, once I get to Ottawa, I'll be listening to the people of Nickel Belt and saying, what would you like me to work on, and pressure the government to move in some direction.
What about the issue of pensions? Because that's also a big issue for seniors. The Conservatives have raised the age level for CPP to 67, I believe, to try and make the CPP pension fund more viable.
Yes, because I hear people saying all the time, well, by the time I get there won't be any money left. So I don't know. I haven't done that kind of math, but our government also has given seniors more deductions on their tax returns. So each year they're going to get several $100s back. The $2,000 extra seniors and single deduction. Then there's income splitting. They get something back for, my mother does get a couple of payments back for, I believe it's hydro and heat and hydro and taxes. So amazingly, she's able to manage on that, and she never worked outside the home. So you have limited dollars to spend, but I think they're really trying hard to give them tax breaks. And of course, jobs always means more money for the government.
Now, that's seniors who have income, who get tax deductions. What about seniors who are primarily surviving on their CPP?
Well, that's my mother, and she is. Well, she didn't even work, so she doesn't get. She gets OAS and which is two payments of.
Yeah, OAS.
What's the other one?
A Canada Pension Plan, and isn't there a guaranteed income?
Guaranteed income supplement. Yes,
Yeah,
she gets those two, and it's not a lot of money, but because she has no mortgage, so I think I don't know how difficult it is for someone without, but she has tax payments and all the heat and hydro. Hydro is very high in her house, but you know what? I am amazed that she's able to manage on that.
There's another issue that's before the courts and that the next government is going to have to deal with, and that is the concept of assisted dying, assisted suicide. That's a very difficult topic, very emotional topic. I think most people have some sympathy for the idea that, someone who's in a lot of pain near the end of their life, maybe, they should be have the choice at least of having assisted suicide. Yet there's a lot of people who are morally against, the idea entirely. I wonder, where do you weigh on it?
Well, I do view life as sacred. So I have a hard time with that. But I understand someone if they're terminally ill and in pain. So, but the thing is, often people are depressed for some time and then they come out of it. And I've seen that in my own family. So to give them an overdose at the first chance, we have to be very careful that and then also there's a huge chance for abuse by perhaps family or whoever's taking care of the people. So I think in Holland they found that. I read things like, the elderly are afraid to go to the hospital because there'll be so much pressure for them to ask for assisted suicide. So we don't want to get down that road too far. So I see many dangers in it, so it's a tough question, and it really needs to be studied seriously.
So is it a question of you for, for the sort of that although, your own opinion may be that life is sacred, but for someone else, is it a question for you of that the sort of proper checks and balances are in place?
Yes,
Is that
exactly.
more where
We
you
will
lie?
need checks and balances. Yeah, it's a tough question.
Just on the subject of fiscal responsibility, you mentioned that that's part of the reason you're a conservative, that sort of thing. Harper's been criticized, for sort of running deficits. He's been criticized again recently for withdrawing money, pulling money back from some programs, so then he could then say, well, we balanced the books, or we ended the year with a surplus, just as they're going into an election. Is that the kind of fiscal responsibility you expect from the Conservatives, or we should expect from the Conservatives?
Well, obviously they would probably had to cut back somewhere in order to balance the books. Well, now they do have a surplus, and now they have the choice to decide, hopefully with the Parliament, where does that surplus go now? Is it use some of it to pay down the debt? I hope they do. I don't know if they will. Or which programs will get more money. So I think that's a better position to be in, rather than saying, oh, let's just spend more, won't worry about the deficit spending.
Right. Just on the subject of infrastructure, Justin Trudeau and the Liberals have quite a large plan to boost the amount of infrastructure, the spending that the federal infrastructure money, the federal government makes available to provinces. What do the Conservatives have that they can offer to voters in terms of infrastructure spending? Is there anything on the platform about that?
Honestly, I've tried to study everything, but that's one area I'm not that familiar with, but
Okay.
I expect that that'll be one of the things they'll look at. Infrastructure will promote jobs, and that helps the government, helps everybody. So for sure, I'm sure that they'll be looking at that as one remedy.
Right.
But the world economy is fragile.
Right.
It's not just Canada, it's worldwide. So yeah, it's an issue for everybody.
You've been in the race for a while now. I'm curious about what you're hearing from voters in Nickel Belt as you go around, and also, on October 20th, if you are the MP for Nickel Belt, what would your priorities be for the riding?
Well, I have heard at the doors healthcare. So that would be one that I would want to focus on and see what can be done, what I can do as an MP.
What kind of needs are you hearing for healthcare? What are people looking for that they don't have? Because obviously people are always concerned about healthcare, but specifically,
well, maybe
what kind of concerns?
wait times, or I heard one issue that it's not across the board, same across the board. Some areas have very good healthcare and others don't. And actually, there was one fellow he was going to talk, but he was just having his supper, so I didn't get a chance to hear the rest of his story. But so there are issues there. Maybe wait times, having to pay for some procedures, or some drugs. Drugs are very expensive. And that's the one question I have in my mind. Why?
Pharmacare.
Yeah, pharmacare. That's another issue that will come up for sure. And I'm not an expert at that, but I would love to meet. In fact, I've got many emails from a medical association, and I will look into that and join their discussions to see what I could do as an MP.
Do you have a sense of where the Conservatives stand on pharmacare or helping people pay for prescriptions?
At this point, I can't say. I don't know what the direction is there.
Okay.
Just still with healthcare, we had a story, this year about a woman from Alberta who ended up having to have an emergency, give birth in an emergency. How do I say that? Give birth in an emergency fashion? That sounds weird. But she ended up having to give birth sort of suddenly, and was stuck with a massive hospital bill. And it turns out that she has. Is it $6,000? Is that her air ambulance bill? And it turns out that air ambulance isn't something that's covered across the board in Canada. Is that something that the federal government maybe could smooth out for?
That's possible. Actually, even ambulance. If you took an ambulance to the hospital, you get a bill afterwards,
Right.
Unless you died. then it's covered.
It's
So,
great.
yeah, I think that's something we should look at. Ambulance, very expensive.
Yeah.
But really, a patient shouldn't have to cover that. I agree with you.
Okay.
So that's one area for sure we could look at.
Okay. A big issue that we've been dealing with in Sudbury and really in Northern Ontario for the past few years is the question about the Ring of Fire and how to develop the Ring of Fire, and who's going to take the lead on this. The federal government, the Conservatives, have pledged $1 billion to the project as long as the province comes through with their share as well. I'm curious, is there what needs to be done from your perspective to get that project moving?
All of the parties need to be at the table, and the environmental studies, first of all, they need to be done. And the First Nations must be on board and in agreement. I understand that the provincial government has not applied for the paperwork to proceed.
Right.
So they're stalling. I don't know what the reasons are for that. It could be that it's just massively expensive. I mean, I know it's going, for infrastructure required, before the mining companies will even start. I think it's very expensive. So perhaps they're looking at the cost, but all three, all levels, and the environmentalists need to be involved in that.
Okay.
It would certainly bring a lot of work, but needs to be balanced with the issues of the environment and First Nations.
Okay.
Of the three main parties, your party is the only one that's committed to continuing the air campaign in Syria against ISIS. I wonder if you give me an idea of what you think of what's going on in there, and what you think of the approach your party is taking, participating with the NATO bombing campaign.
I read the papers on that all the time, and I'm trying to figure out what is going on. The latest I read was that the Syrian government's army has pretty well disintegrated. So I'm very concerned that Russia's in there. And being from Finland, we have battled the Russia before. I have very little trust in that area. So I'm with my government on that. It's a volatile area, and those residents, they're the ones who are suffering and having to leave. It's a huge emergency that the rest of the world needs to step in and help. I don't know if just by diplomacy there could be peace in Syria. So I think that's why the conservative government thinks it has to be three-pronged. You help the refugees resettle and get to a safe place, and you give emergency help wherever needed, but also you've got to deal with ISIS. So.
Right.
There's been a lot of talk about the response to the immigration crisis in Canada. Some people have said that the Tories are dragging their feet a bit in accepting more refugees. What kind of approach would you like to see the government take when it comes to people fleeing that conflict zone?
Yes, I think Canada could probably do a little more than we are doing. Yeah. But obviously, you do need to have checks and balances in place. And we got in trouble with the states that they thought that we were sending terrorists across the border over there after 9/11. So there are issues of safety, and how much can we absorb? Yes, but there are jobs that Canadians don't want to do. So we probably
that immigrants are more willing to do.
Willing for the first little while,
yeah.
until they get on their feet.
I'm sure when your family came over, they did some jobs that
Worked at anything.
Yeah, I know that my father and my grandfather, grandmother, they did jobs that
to get yourself started, and then and Canada's a great country for that. You can work your way up if you're honest and hardworking. You can work your way up. He switched to carpentry after 6 years, so it was more lucrative.
You seem to be I know you're conservative, but you seem to be very sort of sensitive to social issues and things like that. And just on the subject of immigration, the subject of Canada's participation in the bombing raids in Syria, that sort of thing. The Conservative government has been criticized for, some have said, harming Canada's reputation as peacekeepers, of taking us, the global perspective of Canada from peacekeepers to something more militant. Do you agree with that criticism of what the Conservatives have done in terms of using Canada's military?
I have a really hard time with that question, because there are 2 points of view. How do you defeat that kind of an enemy? The Finns tried fighting Russia, and they did. They pushed pushed them way back, but
Actually,
eventually they had to make peace with them.
That's right. The Finns did quite a good job, actually, of,
And they
against
took,
such a massive army.
yes, and Russia took a big chunk of the territory of Finland. So, of
You
course,
made them pay for it, though.
yes. If you could make peace without loss of life, of course, that's number one option, I think. I don't know if in the face of the type of atrocities that are being committed in the Middle East now, I don't know what the right...
I guess my question is, has the conservative use of Canada's military harmed Canada's reputation globally, which is something that, that Jean Chrétien has said,
I'm going to have to go back to Europe to find out what they think. The Americans, what are the Americans saying about that?
I don't know.
They're warlike people, so...
At least their government is.
I don't know if that's just a line that's being used because it's election time.
Yeah, that's why I'm asking. I'm just asking
I
for
don't
your
think so.
perspective.
I don't think that it would have harmed us because we are known as, in Europe, we're too polite.
Stephen Harper has never come to Sudbury, and it's been a sort of a tough road to hoe for a while for conservatives in this area. I wonder, maybe you can give us an idea of why you support him, why you think he's a good prime minister, why maybe he's misunderstood by a lot of people in this area.
He hasn't come because we vote otherwise. If we voted a little more blue, I'm sure we'd get him here. I did meet him actually in North Bay a few weeks ago.
What were your impressions?
Oh, it was just very quick. He was there to visit the campaign, Jay Aspin. He's a very smart man. He's a strategist. And he's not fuzzy and warm like some other politicians are. But I think as voters, we need to look at what's good for the country, what's most prudent, who's the best leader as far as skills in all areas. For me, there's no contest. I can't vote for the other two parties just because I don't trust the leaders. I don't trust their financial record. Well, looking at their financial record, I can't vote for them for that reason. So I'm a natural conservative. But he could soften his approach. Yes, I understand that. But you're never going to get a perfect leader or a perfect party that you're going to be in full agreement with every issue, right? So for me, that's the closest to my values.
Why do you think it's in our best interest to vote for his party, for the Conservatives, and for Stephen Harper?
Well, for sure, fiscal responsibility. And I think with that goes the ability to administer more programs, whether it's social programs or health. If you're careful with your money, then you have options to know what to do with it. And we can put more into healthcare or into infrastructure. But first you got to know how to spend and how not to spend your money. And I don't like debt. I don't even like a mortgage.
No, me neither. You seem to take a sort of a very reasoned approach to how you look at politics, how you look at things. On that topic, the Tories have been criticized, for some have said muzzling Canada's scientists. And on the subject of reasoned approach, there's nothing more reasoned than science. Are you familiar with that issue? Do you agree with that criticism? Should scientists in Canada, have more when they're government scientists? Should they have more of a right to express their opinion or express what their findings are without having to be filtered through a federal government communications officer?
I am a little bit familiar with it. I've heard scientists on CBC radio, for example, and I sympathize with them. I am friends with some scientists. I think that's very important to give them the freedom to do their work, and they should be collaborating with other scientists all over the world, because there's a lot of questions in health and other science areas. I would push for more freedom for them if I were elected.
Okay. He's also been criticized for having a antagonistic or contentious relationship with journalists.
Oh, I don't know too much about that, but
Okay.
yes, it seems to be that, the journalists sometimes are out to make news, and
Sure.
at the expense of of the person they're covering. Perhaps, I don't know.
Okay.
I'm just new to this. You people are behaving yourself quite well.
Well, we're nice people generally. Well, me more than he, maybe.
Okay.
But, now, you can tell us about the campaign trail. What have you learned? Like, what have you learned about the process? Has it given you more of an intimate knowledge of how politics works in Canada, do you think, by becoming a candidate?
Yes. Well, yeah. Even working on other campaigns. Oh, it's just. I wasn't ready. I knew that would be very hectic, and you've got to be on your toes constantly. And there's so much to read and learn. I mean, I love to learn, but I mean, in a short time. It's very interesting. The party politics. I don't know. There's a downside to party politics as well as an upside.
What would you
So,
say the downside is?
that we don't work together enough to find solutions. As politicians, we're too busy trying to boost our party rather than focus on the issue at hand and what would be the best solution. I hope that eventually we get to a place where we can do that. Because if I get elected, that's what I want to do. I want to work with all different parties and different levels of government to work on solutions, because that's the only way you're going to advance.
Excellent. Is there anything else you wanted to add, or anything you think voters that voters should know about Aino Laamanen before they go into the ballot box? No, they don't go into the ballot box. The voting booth. Pardon me.
Voting booth. I really care about Sudbury and the North. I love the North. I'm a bush person, and I think we should be careful how we vote. We should not vote on emotion, but consider all the parameters and who would be the best to lead us forward in the next few years.
Mm-hmm. And for you, that's Stephen Harper.
That's Stephen Harper.
Excellent. Thank you very much for joining us today, Aino. We really
most-
appreciate your time.
You're most welcome. Thank you.
And thank you for joining us as well, NorthernLife.ca readers. As always, we will be active on October 19th during election night, so stick with us. Visit our social media feeds on Facebook and on Twitter at NorthernLife, at Northern_Life. We will be giving you updates on the local races, updates on the national scene, and we will be with you through to the end. Man, I'm having trouble talking today on this Friday morning. Thank God it's a long weekend this week. Have a great weekend and happy Thanksgiving to everyone.